The 2026 Global Age Assurance Standards Summit is coming to Manchester this April 14th to 16th. I'm Joel McConvey, and today on the Biometric Update Podcast, I speak with Tony Allen, who organizes the summit through the Age Check certification scheme, for a preview of what to expect on the schedule and how to navigate the whirlwind world of global age assurance policy. There's so much to talk about in the age assurance sector right now, so much going on. Let's start with the upcoming 2026 Global Age Assurance Standards Summit. First, maybe you can tell us just a bit about the summit, about its history, about what's happening this year. Give us the pitch, Tony.
Yeah, well, we've been running this summit now. This is the third year we've run it. It's been hugely supported by the age assurance industry, by regulators, and by the major relying party community and acceptor community. I think if I sort of describe the three we've had, the first one was about we need some standards in this space, and we need to progress those. And we now have a global international adopted standard in ISO 27566, so we can put a tick in that box. The second one last year was we need regulators to really get their act together. And I think, although that's still work in progress, the regulators have responded. There is a global sort of agreement on the basic principles of regulation on age assurance that's been put out a few weeks ago. And so we're seeing that kind of what we were calling for at that summit, being the regulators being more coordinated, thinking much more about proportionality and risk around the world, and maybe not having such differential requirements in different jurisdictions, which, of course, if you're running a global business, is a real challenge. This year's summit, and the theme that's clearly emerging in this year's summit, is the challenges of implementation. So we are at a juncture now where it's coming in. It's either in already or it's in bits of the world. What the companies are really now facing up to the real practical challenges of actually making that a reality. And so all the sessions this year are going to be, I think, focused on the things that come up, the tripwires, the problems, the difficulties, but also the art of the possible. What you can do to solve these issues, how you can do it well, and how you can learn from innovation and creativity across the industry.
This is really the first summit that's happening since sort of age assurance has become a real thing for most people.
This last year, it's been, we started with the Supreme Court ruling in the US. We've had the Ofcom regulations came in July. We had the French ones came in just a little bit before that, actually. We had the Australia Social Media Minimum Age Act coming in December. We've got the ECA Act coming in about 3 weeks' time in Brazil. So there's just, it's all happening now. And so you could argue that people should be ahead of the regulations coming in, and they should have got their head around this before, but they haven't. It's all coming together into this is all happening, and it's happening now, and there are real difficulties with it. People think that age assurance is one of those things, well, it's easy, you just ask people their age and get them to prove it. But it's really much more complex than people think it is. And so that's really what we're focused on. And just to give you the flavour of why this is so important. We're a relatively small business based in the UK. Yes, we've got global reach, and I think people know about us. We're running an event here, which is 200 or so, 250 people. It's a relatively new event, and we're always in competition with the big global conferences and exhibitions and all that sort of thing. And because you've been to it isn't an exhibition. It's a very focused policy summit. I think what underlines why it's important, and if I just look over to my sort of whiteboard I've got on the side here, Visa, eBay, Google, Xvideos, Yubo, TikTok, Philip Morris, Meta, are just on my list here of the companies that are not only coming, to listen in, but are coming to run workshops or to participate in the innovation suites. And I'll run through the various different things we've got going on in a moment. And that kind of underlines that these are companies that don't just rock up with, and some of them are bringing like half a dozen or so of their teams to this to really get to grips with it.
Wow.
And then, of course, on the other side, you've got the providers, and we've got basically, I think, about 35 providers represented. So it kind of underlines the importance of it to them, because those companies don't turn up to things like ID Week
So,
and some of the big global conferences.
what about regulators? Who's coming from the regulatory side?
So we have regulators. So Ofcom ICO will be there in the UK. We've got the German regulators. We've got Brazilian regulators. The Australians probably dialing in. We've got some of the US ones. There's a few, but actually almost in line with the fact that we moved from the need for regulation to implementation. The regulators now are like, it's the regulations there. Well, we've got nothing to say. They're there. You've got to comply with them. And so they're coming along. They unlike last year when we had the whole sort of UN style summit, which kind of worked, and I'll be absolutely honest, kind of worked in places and kind of didn't in others. We're not doing that this year. We're going back more to the way we did it in Manchester the year before, and it's less about regulators and public policy and more about proportionality, risk assessment, the art of the possible, and the implementation side of things.
You know, we've talked about sort of throughout this whole debate that the importance of relying parties and making sure that they understand what's happening and how to integrate it and how to be compliant. Do you find that there's more interest coming from that side now, that it's all
definitely this year?
Yeah,
definitely this year, and that's been our focus in the team has been to get more of them engaged, and they're difficult to engage, to be fair, but we're definitely seeing more engagement from them, and they're now facing the reality of that. Meta, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg's been up in court giving evidence this last week. When you've got the big boss in court giving evidence on the subject that you're working on, that raises the importance of it within the organization. So the team that are doing age assurance in Meta, they'll have felt some heat from above in the last few weeks while they've been preparing for that case. And to be fair, he turned up and I don't necessarily agree with his position, but he turned up and he presented his position very succinctly and very clearly and very eloquently, as you would expect. But to get to the point where he was able to do that, there would have been enormous focus across the organization on what he's going to get asked, what he's going to get asked about, what he's going to respond, all of that thing. So it's gone from being that's something that team over in Brussels deal with to the bosses up in court this week. What the hell are we going to say?
Yeah, knock that up the priority list a few steps. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So they'll. I mean, they've clearly done that, and the others. I'm not picking on Meta in particular, but they're here and they're going to be here in numbers. And so same with TikTok as well. They're here and they've got numbers coming. So it's definitely engaging with them more. And I think what we've tried to do with the agenda is to make it more orientated towards that as well. So if I describe the summit, obviously it's a series of concurrent meetings. It's not a exhibition. It's not a kind of load of sheep all going around wherever you take them. A led thing. It is. You've got 6 things going on at the same time. In fact, at some points, you've got 7 or 8 things going on at the same time, and the delegates pick what is of interest to them. That brings with it a number of challenges for us, but also a number of benefits. So the benefits are that it makes the people who are presenting work harder because they've got to attract people to the room. So you've got to think about what you're presenting, get people in the room and present something which is really engaging. So they work quite hard rather than just turning up and giving a stump speech. It also means that the delegates don't have to sit through something that they don't want to sit through. Because there's so much stuff going on, they can literally go in if they want. And oh, this is boring me. To get up and walk out and go somewhere else and find something else to do. And we've always maintained that kind of very informal, come and go as you please, do what you want, go where you want to go. And I think it's been quite successful over the previous two. And in fact, the biggest complaint we've had has been there's too much going on. It's just like, I need to be in 3 different places at once. And I'm going, okay, well, that's the downside, I guess, of that. But bring more of your team and experience and get them to do that, delegate. And I think we're seeing that this year with people who've been for the last 2 years going, I'm now bringing 4 or 5 people because I know I need to be here and here. And let's spread the load.
Yeah.
Of course, on the downside for us, it's quite complicated. So it's like 3D chess, and I joined you from the meeting with the team here in the office where we had it up on the big screen. We've been going through and going, that's not going to work. They're clashing with that, and yeah, it is like 3D chess.
The joys of scheduling, yeah.
I know, but we're getting there. We're near to it. And the annoying thing is that people haven't registered or haven't responded, and all of that, which is just an organisation's challenge. But if I just talk about the different sessions we've got,
yeah.
So we have a main stage. Again, our main stage is going to be curated by John Carr, OBE. He's led the previous 2.
Lovely.
But it's much more back to what we had in Manchester, which is more a series of presentations rather than it being the kind of... We tried the UN style thing. I quite like that idea, but I'm not entirely sure that it always worked. You were in the room for some of them. Some of them were really interesting, heated debates, and some of them nobody showed up.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it was a big room, and I think when there was the sort of critical mass to have the conversation, it was great. But yeah, that sort of in and out feature left a few people sort of, I think, having fairly like stripped down conversations, which was still good, but again,
yeah. So we're doing the main stage, and we've also put bigger gaps between the sessions as well. So there's a 10-minute gap between the sessions. A, for the moving around, but B, that gives an opportunity for more Q&A and to let it flow through. So John's going to be managing that room. We then have 3 separate mini theatres. We've always had the 3 mini theatres, but we've mixed up the timetable and the sessions now so that they are either 20-minute, 35-minute, or 50-minute sessions. And we've described this to the people coming that, a 20-minute session I describe as an about me session. This is me, this is who I am, this is what we do, this is how we do it, etc. A 35-minute collaboration session, so 2 speakers typically. We've worked with X or Y, and this is what we've done, this is how we've come up with it, whether it's an academic or a research or whatever they've done. And then the 50-minute sessions are a panel or a fireside chat type session. So, a fireside chat, one-to-one interview for 50 minutes, you're running through the business or whatever they're doing with a bit of Q&A. And the panel sessions are more of a 2 or 3 people with a moderator. Mm-hmm. So that's going on in the mini theatres. We then have some round tables. So these are smaller rooms that you can do workshop sessions in. So we've got the likes of... So TikTok wants to do a workshop session in there where they want to get people to come and talk to them about how they can get TikTok to be better at age assurance. We've got the Brazilian delegation doing a thing about the new Brazilian legislation, which will literally just be in by the time we get to the meeting there. We've got the proof of age standard scheme. Their board meeting is happening in there. There's all sorts going on in there. We then have an ISO masterclass for 2 days. This is a 8 1.5-hour sessions of deep dive into the international standard. So literally what this clause is about, what it's trying to describe. So if you've got somebody who wants to really fully understand the standard, product engineers, they can go into the masterclass. We have this new thing called innovation suites, but 2 of these. And here what we have is we've got 21 providers who've bid to demonstrate their innovations. And we've got, I think, 18 or 20 acceptors. We put the acceptors in a room for an hour, and then they then pick the 5 providers they want to see.
Ah.
They get 10 minutes each. They come in, it's one-to-one under an NDA, so it's literally in a room in front of Roblox or TikTok or Tesco's or whoever, and they've got 10 minutes to explain why their innovation is going to blow their socks off and solve all their problems and make their day very bright. And then the next one comes in, the next one comes in, and there's 5 in an hour period. So it'll be really fast, really rapid, hoping to get a lot of buzz going in those rooms. All of that.
Sounds like a high-pressure situation for these presenters. But
completely, putting the pressure on. It's going to have a big red button on the table and a massive clock that goes off when they get to their 10 minutes, and bit of theatre into the whole thing.
Everybody loves a big red button. Everybody.
Exactly. So they stick a big red button on the table and just bring a bit of theatre to it, which is what we're aiming to do with that. We've then got the AVPA Business Lounge, which is more central this year than it was last year. Last year it was kind of off to one side. This year it's actually bang centre in the middle of the whole thing. We've got the awards dinner, which we'll be shortly making an announcement about the host of that. It's a BBC TV personality that's going to be hosting that. Just haven't signed a contract with them yet, so I don't want to announce anything until we've signed the contract.
Yep.
And that is got the 8 awards up for that. We'll be giving out the masterclass certificates. I hope we'll be able to give out some certifications for the first that have gone through the 27566, but they have to, of course, complete their audits for that, which we're getting a bit close to time-wise. There'll be fringe events going on. There's just loads of stuff.
It's madness, Tony. You've got a vast. You're hosting the Oscars, and you're hosting a convention. You're hosting all this stuff at once. It's remarkable, actually, and I commend you for putting it all together. I want to talk a bit before we sort of get too far off track about 27566 and about what it means to have a standard, at anchoring this discussion now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people are sometimes a little bit dismissive of international standards, but they serve a very clear purpose, and that is a recognised global. Not minimum position, but accepted position of what good looks like globally. And they enable international trade effectively. So they enable you to be able to say, I've got an ISO certified system. So long as it's certified properly by an accredited body, which doesn't have to be us. There may be others that come to the space, and we're hoping there will be. As long as it's certified, if you get that certified in Indonesia, through that, it should be accepted here in the UK, in the US, around the world, without you having to then come to the UK to get certified in the UK, etc. So it gives you that scalability quickly. The other thing it does for the relying parties is it gives them a really easy gateway to cut the wheat from the chaff. So what you will find is that maybe not just yet because it's still fairly new, but you'll start to see when the requests for proposals go out from the relying parties, they'll be, you bid to bring your age assurance system, or we want to add this to vending machines or whatever. You get to these, and there's they'll get to the point where your prerequisites, like essential and desirable things. Now, at the moment, they may say certification generally is desirable, but what they'll start to say is 27566 is essential, as they say for 27001, for instance, in terms of information security management. And ultimately, what that means as a provider is you could bid all you want for these RFPs, but you're not going to win any unless you've got these basic baseline things which they're looking for. And so it gives the relying parties It doesn't stop them having to do their own due diligence. It doesn't stop them having to work out how they would integrate it to their systems and how it will work with their IT. But what it does is it gives them confidence that these companies have got the basics right, have got the, at a global level, have got the privacy right, got the security right, got the acceptability right. And it means that they can almost start the conversation a bit later on than they are at the moment, where at the moment they're going, new provider comes in, right, we've got to verify all of your data protection and security and all these other things but before we can proceed. Now they can go, well, you've got that certificate, so we'll take that as read. We'll probably come back to that in due diligence just to verify and check it with our systems, but we can move the conversation on from that initial phase. So that is principally what they mean. There are lots of other benefits as well. So, for instance, regulators will now, because it's now been published, regulators will now be able to start cross-referencing it in what they do. In fact, this morning I've had something from the Irish regulator, which is the first one I've seen that fully references 27566 in what they're doing and how they're approaching something. The e-Safety Commissioner's Guide, the problem with the e-Safety Commissioner's Guide and the Ofcom was they came before the standard was published, and their lawyers said we can't include it if it's not published, which is fair enough. I understand that. But so that means that we'll need to wait for the next iteration. But I fully expect on the next iteration they'll refer to the published standards. So I think, as I said, it's the first one I saw this morning. We're only just over 2 months into it being published, and it's already starting to trickle out there, and we'll see that more and more. And then I think the final thing for the providers is, in addition to getting the leg up on procurement and complying with regulation, it also gives the industry credibility overall. That whole gravitas. This is a globally standardized industry. This is not just a collective, a load of people who think this is a decent product to be able to sell out there. The whole industry gains, even the ones that aren't certified, gain that gravitas. And that's the reason why the AVPA have announced that they want all of their full members to be certified by the end of this year, because it helps lift the whole industry. You can bat away a whole series of policy objections using standardization and global, and it covers the 5 core characteristics: functionality, performance, privacy, security, and acceptability.
Yeah, I always think about comparing to people. Why do you trust airlines? Why will you get on a plane? Well, strong regulations, standards. Now Age Assurance has one too, and that will inevitably just evolve. So
I do a speech actually with which I give to schools and to colleges when I do speak into colleges, and it's similar principle to that. But I basically they all come in and they sit down, and I start my presentation, and then I start with, okay, what on earth possessed you to sit on that chair? And it's sort of like thinking about I'm sat on a chair right now. So I get to stand up and I get to pick the chair up and look underneath it and find the label on the chair. And you'll find the international standard marked on the chair and how it meets and complies with the fire regulations. It's all marked on the chair, sometimes on the plastic, sometimes on a label. And that's the start of my presentation, basically. And the reason why we just sit down on chairs and don't think about it is because they're all built to international global standards. They're all the same height. They're all the same, except for kids' chairs, but they're all the same thing. They interoperate with tables. It's actually, when you stop and think about it, it's a great example of how global standards have enabled a worldwide trade, and yet not one chair is necessarily the same as another chair. There are thousands of different chairs and different styles and methods out there, but they all fundamentally comply with the same height regulations, the same weight regulations, the same functional capability standards. There is nowhere in law, in UK law, I don't know about US and Canada, but there's nowhere in UK law that requires a chair to be made to a particular standard. doesn't require it. Everyone does it, and everyone uses chairs that are made to a particular standard because it's uneconomic to try and sell a chair that isn't made to a particular standard because no one will buy it. Mm-hmm. So I mean, the chair safety standards came in 1977 and were updated quite significantly in the 1980s. So 50 years ago, we're on year one of age assurance being in that space. My aim is, maybe not 50 years, hopefully, but within the next 10 years or so, people don't think twice about age assurance. It's just done. It's done to international standards. They just do it in the same way as they do sitting on a chair.
I want to ask you briefly about Australia, where it's this sort of the first big country to implement social media age assurance restrictions, and how you think it's gone in terms of the rollout. And then I want to touch on the UK too. But first, let's talk about Australia. What do you think, Tony? How's that gone?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we did the technology trial where we looked at all the possible opportunities that are there. I think the conclusion of that trial was that age assurance can be done. There is lots of evidence to demonstrate how it can be done. There are lots of examples of how that is being done. It is being done. There are things there. And we're now moving on to, yes, it can be done, but is it being done well is probably where we're at now with Australia. And I know there's reviews going on in the conclusions of the trial. It can be done. There are ways to be done. It's privacy. There are privacy issues. You've got to be serious about cybersecurity. You've got to watch out for over collection of data. Those are all the things that we said in the trial. And nobody really, other than maybe some of the real fringes, has challenged or attacked the conclusions of that trial, which obviously I'm really personally pleased about. It demonstrates that it was a robust and careful exercise. Yes, we've got the kind of far privacy, freedom, libertarian going all internet bad. It's what it's their position, unless you can do whatever you want on the internet without anybody ever. Okay, that's not realistic. And then, at the other extreme, I think we've probably got some that are at the basically you need to prove through double identification exactly who you are every time you switch your computer on before you do anything. At the other end of the spectrum. And yeah, they've all got their points of view, and I never attack people for having a point of view, but they're quite extreme edges of the true debate, which is clearly somewhere between those positions. And I think people in the centre of the debate were they felt that trial put that question to bed on can it be done, and I would agree with that. In terms of you've got an interesting political dichotomy going on in Australia, because you've got, yes, it can be done. All the social media platforms know it can be done. All of them have got the capability and facility to do it. They'd all had these tools plugged in. They weren't necessarily using them, but they had them plugged in, so they knew that they could do it. Do they really want to do it? And do they really want to come up with a situation where it was so easy for them to do that everyone goes, well, we'll do that as well? So they're now fighting against global contagion from Australia, and we've already seen that in the European Union and some US states as well. Well, if Australia can do it, why can't we? And of course, that's now where and we kind of expected that. So the social media, and I don't name names here, but they are quietly acquiescing, but also quietly enabling the challenges to come to the surface. So the circumventions they're surfacing. I know that Discord have been doing a lot of, I didn't name it either, but they've been doing a lot of stuff as well. So, there's that. I think we will get to a tipping point where it becomes, at the minute, it's in their economic interest to resist age assurance contagion around the world, we'll get to a tipping point where it ceases to be in their economic interest to do that. And it'll be the other way. It'll be, we're just doing it by default. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet. Probably another 2 or 3 years, I suspect, before we're there.
Yeah.
But I think certainly if the big ones, I suspect, are the G7 and G20, more the G7, but within the G7 as well. If you go for like the states of Texas, California, Florida, New York, which quite frankly is where 80% of Americans live.
Yeah.
That's economically significant. You've got Brazil, huge market. You've got Indonesia, you've got Japan, you've got the UK, you've got the European Union. Once those have all gone, we're going to do what Australia are doing in one way or another. Then the economic balance will tip the other way, where it becomes actually uneconomic not to do it.
The US is interesting because that's where, the legal groups that represent social media, specifically NetChoice, they have sort of the strongest ground to push back because they have the First Amendment. So do you see the states kind of taking the same route as everyone else eventually, or do you think that opposition is going to shape how the legislation plays out?
I think the First Amendment issues in the US are the Paxton case, which I was an expert witness in. It kind of set a line which is effectively saying that you have no First Amendment right to access free speech material that's intended for adults without proving you're an adult. Okay, so that deals with porn and gambling and adverts for alcohol and for tobacco. So it's relatively straightforward for the states to now legislate on something that protects children from that level of that type of harm.
Yep.
So I think we'll see lots of those coming through. Social media is slightly different in that the key difference with social media is it's not necessarily material that's intended for adults.
Right.
So that kind of undoes the rationale that was in the Paxton case from the Supreme Court, because they were basically saying that if this material is for adults and only for adults, you need to prove you're an adult, and you've got no constitutional right to see it unless you prove you're an adult.
Right.
But with social media, you haven't got that, and so I think there is a degree of leverage that the industry still has over those states about how they exactly do that. Mm-hmm. But this is my big but. Whether it's App Store accountability, whether it's social media, whether it's whatever, what the companies need to start to understand is these laws are not coming from the odd senator here and there who thinks this might be a good way to, shoot the breeze and spend some time. They're coming from a groundswell of parents who are seeing real harm, and they're seeing it at scale and globally. No matter what you think of politicians, and there are lots of politicians who are, trying to feather their own nest or trying to respond to a particular interest group, whether it's health insurance or the oil industry or whatever it is. Yeah, that happens, and yeah, so be it. This isn't that. This is politicians responding to voters and to that groundswell of opinion. That is these companies' user base. This is, and I don't think you can not take that seriously as a company. Or if you don't take that seriously, that's the end of you as a company.
Yeah.
I think what we're going through at the moment is, I describe the social media companies as teenagers. Most of them are teenagers. Facebook's a little bit older now, 21 years, I think. Mm-hmm. But most of them are still teenagers. And they're growing up. Mm-hmm. And they're at that inflection point now where if they want their brand to last, they have to be adults themselves as companies. They have to grow up as companies. Mm-hmm. They can no longer get away with pushing the boundaries, being teenagers, being kids. They've got to be that adult brand. And you've seen that with Meta. And you've seen it with Meta, you've seen it with Alphabet, you've seen it with Apple, although Apple obviously more on the hardware side, but with Microsoft, they see the risks of not being that grown-up corporate business.
I'm thinking about
and some of the others still haven't got there yet.
Yeah, I'm thinking about a specific letter that we won't mention, but yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, there are examples of where you see them going the other way and going, right, well, let's not bother with any of that. Let's just have a playground for the worst of the world. And you can see immediately the kill that has had on that brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the brand wasn't particularly strong in the first place to start with,
Mm-hmm.
and it's decided through its leadership to take this pathway, and it's killed it as a. It's not going to be around in a few years' time.
Agreed.
Everyone's moving on. It's last year's thing. It's annoying. I've stopped using it. I think loads of people that I know have just gone out. I still have the funny thing is you still have the account because you don't want people to do account takeover.
Right.
But I'm not using it. I don't even go on it anymore. And so they're starting to experience that.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett did a piece, really interesting piece about because he's famous for investing in dull things.
Right. Yeah.
But incredibly successful and incredibly long term,
mm-hmm.
but dull. I mean,
sure.
That's how he's got to where he is.
He also likes tax in a way that other billionaires don't. So
yeah, no, it's just nice and simple. Keep it smooth. But he's invested in businesses. But you can see behind the scenes, he has a very strong influence over their kind of corporate governance and just keep it smooth, keep it flowing, keep the money coming in, brand control, all those sorts of things.
Being an adult,
being an adult, yeah, it's all grown up stuff, isn't it? Dull but grown up.
Before we sign off, we're sort of getting to time here, but I want to ask about the UK because there's another question at play in the UK, and that's who should do age assurance. And you've got the consultation happening right now. The government is about to launch. The private sector seems to feel that they are being left out or pushed aside. What's your take on where this is going to end up?
So a couple of key things that I keep on repeating, but number one, identity assurance is not age assurance, and age assurance is not identity assurance. They should be kept deliberately separate in policy. Yep. You tend to find that all the problems that age assurance have with the policy things and all the is when they trip over to being about identity assurance.
Yeah.
And governments don't get, and a DCIT in the UK definitely doesn't get that. I don't know, to be fair to DCIT, the digital identity team in DCIT don't get that. The people who work in the online safety team do, because they've been very clear about that. But the people who work in digital identity don't get that. The second thing I would say in the UK is that we have a current political landscape which is what I would describe as quietly nationalisation. Quietly, the taxpayer can do this, the government can do this, we can do this better. So they're nationalising the railways, for instance. They're nationalising quietly. They want to nationalise water. They want to do. There's various other things, but they have this mindset that there's no good reason why the government can't do this and do it better. There are certain cases where that probably is the case. I think water is probably a good example of that. But there is lessons from history are, generally speaking, that leads to underinvestment. So it might work to start with, but it's not maintained and it's not sustainable, and it ends up being a taxpayer-funded thing that just gradually gets worse and worse and doesn't keep up. So underinvestment becomes an issue. The second thing is it doesn't employ people to pay tax. It basically means that the tax take from private sector, you need the tax take from private sector to be in excess of 60-70% in order for the country to be sustained. Otherwise, you're just moving money around in a circle, which is communism. You it doesn't work unless you've got private sector businesses providing employment and the tax thing. And the third thing I would say is that lessons from history, particularly lessons from the last 20 years, is the speed of evolution of identity and information technology is way faster than the speed of governments to be able to keep up with it. Way, way faster. It's pretty fast, even for private companies to keep up with. Trying to do that within a national ID scheme is just never going to keep up. And so we'll end up with a relatively clunky, taxpayer-funded ID that will be partially usable but won't be interoperable and won't connect with things in the way that the dreamers think it might, because they haven't invested in it properly, they haven't got it set up properly. It isn't interoperable globally. I mean, the UK has decided to go down the route of using GPG 44 and 45, which nobody else in the world uses. So it's never going to be compatible with the EU app, for instance. It isn't even compatible with what they're doing in Scotland, because Scotland has its own national identity and digital identity system, which they've just been quietly getting on with for years.
Right.
It's called the National Entitlement Card. It isn't what they do in the UK at DCIT isn't compatible with those. It also isn't compatible with the Financial Conduct Authority's requirements for customer due diligence and the Financial Action Task Force global system for preventing anti-money laundering and terrorist financing. It's not compatible with those either.
Do you think this is even going to work then, given all this? Do you think that this is going to happen?
I think it'll collapse again. They've tried it 3 or 4 times. I mean, it collapses every time because they don't understand the basic fundamental technical and policy issues around it. So they look at things like Estonia and Slovakia and countries like that where they've got digital ID. But the issue they've got there is that the culture of those countries has been ingrained in the concept you carry your papers and you carry your identity with you. And even though they're free states now, the country's culture and their behaviour is it perfectly normal to carry your papers. You then look at Norway and the Nordic banks and the way that the Nordic banks do ID. And again, brilliant, great, good way of doing it. But embedded in 40 years of the development of online banking and everything being connected to your bank in those countries. Mm-hmm. And look at Singapore, where SingPass, you can't do anything in Singapore without SingPass, really. But they've now got the problem in Singapore where they've got 50,000 out of a population of only about 2.5 million, 50,000, mainly kids, young people aged 18 to sort of 25, that are what they call identity mules, mm-hmm. where they've effectively sold their identity to criminals and are now struggling to get that back again to enable them to be able to do things like get a mortgage or get a house. But when they were kids, they gave their identity away to criminals to use for laundering. That's a big issue in Singapore. So they just don't think it through, and governments always come back to, we want to control this. This is something we have to control. This is something that we've got to have as a government function, and they can't answer the question why when you ask them. Yeah, that's where we are. It's crackers.
Thanks to Tony Allen for his insights on everything related to age assurance. To learn more about the 2026 Global Age Assurance Standards Summit, including how to register, and to read all about the latest news on digital identity and biometrics, be sure to visit www.biometricupdate.com.